Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen. Good evening and welcome. My name's Nathan Rose and I'm recording this video from Graz in Austria, where I'm playing in a classical over-the-board chess tournament. And in this video I'm going to be recapping my game and what I learned from it. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, do hit the subscribe button. I do all kinds of content on chess, from the history of the game to my favourite software tools, and videos like this one where I review my own games. So let's get into it. I'm playing another player rated over 1900, so that's higher rated than me. And we start off with e4. We get a Sicilian, and this is the Kalashnikov variation. I bring the knight to b5 with the idea of diving in here with check, so black prevents that one. And here I play knight c3. This is already a bit of an inaccuracy on my part. It's not the move that I've studied. I mentioned in my last video that I have been in a bit of a time crunch in the lead up to this tournament, so I haven't done as much preparation as I normally would. The thing is, because black hasn't yet played knight f6, threatening the e4 pawn, white doesn't actually need to rush with knight to c3, and white instead has time for c4, setting up a Maroczy bind. But okay, knight to c3, the knight gets kicked, it goes back, and black plays bishop e7 straight away. So I dive in with knight to d5. The idea is to trade off this dark squared bishop, and that can make this pawn on d6 weak later on. That's a backward pawn, which is a type of pawn weakness. So knight f6, I do take that bishop, and now I do need to defend this pawn, so I do that with bishop d3. We get b5, and I keep developing, and I think this move here is quite a good one from my opponent. I was threatening to take this knight, which would have damaged black's pawn structure, but as we'll see the game progress, after knight g6 and I castle and h6, I think what black was hoping for here is that I would take this knight, and then after black takes back, with the dark squared bishop gone, knight to f4 becomes more possible. So I was calculating this. I was thinking that in this case I probably would play g3 to prevent knight to f4, but in that case we get bishop to h3, which attacks the rook and maybe causes me some problems on the light squares. I guess I'm okay. I can just play rook e1 and maybe look to trade off that black light squared bishop later, but I decided not to go for this, and instead after h6 I just went back with the bishop with some ideas of coming to b4 to perhaps target that weak backward pawn. This is my main plan. So black goes bishop to g4, attacking the queen. I block that one. That does open up this dark squared diagonal though, so black gives a check, forcing king to h1. And then I've got to stop and think. We played most of the opening moves now, so what can I do here to improve my position? The move that I really wanted to play here was c4. And this turns out to be the best move. But I was not quite sure about the evaluation after black takes, and that does win a pawn for black. The thing is that after rook to b1, and really the only reasonable square for the queen to go to is d5, white's got the open file. White can give this check if he wants, so plenty for the pawn, but it is of course much easier when you've got the engine, and it's always a bit harder too when you're all the way back in this position, right, to see all of that and to convince yourself that it's really worth the pawn that you're giving up. So what I played instead was queen to e1 with some ideas of chasing away black's queen, either this way or this way. So black castles, and I go ahead and ask the queen where it wants to go to, winning a tempo. Goes to b7, and now black comes up with a good plan. He's got both of his knights targeting the f4 square, and I've only got my dark squared bishop able to take one of them. I could consider playing g3, but that has its own drawbacks. Like with g3, again, we have this bishop h3 that black could play, hitting the rook. And also, this move makes it a little bit more dangerous on this diagonal, having weakened my own pawn structure around my king. So g3 definitely has its costs, as well as the benefit of preventing a knight from landing on that square. So given that I didn't want to play g3, and that I'm allowing one of black's knights to come into f4, I've got to find counterplay on another area of the board. This is always the right way to think. If you can't stop your opponent's plan, then you have to come up with your own counter chances elsewhere. And I found a good way of doing that with queen b4, targeting that backward pawn that I was thinking about all the way back when I captured that dark squared bishop right in the opening. So I'm attacking that pawn, black defends it, but now I also get to play c4 in better circumstances than before. Black obviously can't take this because the queen would hang. And I've got some pressure against the b5 pawn now. Black does play his knight into f4, but by bringing the bishop back, I actually open up another attacker onto this pawn. So now there's two attackers on that pawn, and I'm definitely getting some play on the queen side. So black defends this pawn, but it does leave this pawn here without enough defenders. So I grab it, and now black plays d5. This is a move that black is often looking to make in the Sicilian. Tends to open up the position. So I play an intermezzo first, answering the threat with a bigger threat on the queen. Always a good idea to do that. Queen goes to b7, and now I take off one of black's knights. So black takes back, and the reason that I took one of those knights first was that I wanted to, well, if black takes here with the knight, now I've got this ability to come in here with the battery attack against h7. Whereas before, if I'd taken on d5 straight away, then black's got this fork. Turns out that white's still okay here. The computer says that you just pin the knight and everything's fine. Computer sees everything, of course. But I don't know. I guess you can also go back here just to defend it directly. But as the game progressed, I did take one of those knights first, and we get the bishop capturing on d5 first, preventing that queen to e4 idea. So if we take a step back here, I'm up a pawn, but I felt as though that this pawn is going to be impossible to hold on to in the long term. Black can just play rook to b8, and this pawn is too overextended for me to add extra defenders to it. If I look at my pieces, these rooks are okay, this bishop has got a nice diagonal, my queen is active, but my problem piece is my knight. It's over on a3, not doing anything at all. So my thinking was, I can bring this knight out to c4 with a few threats. It's attacking this pawn, it's also defending this pawn. So if the knight's on c4, I expected that black would take it, and then I take the bishop, and then black would win back the pawn, but I would have at least eliminated this very strong black light squared bishop, and also traded off my worst piece. So this is often something that you can do when you've got a material advantage. You can look to give that material back in order to secure a different type of advantage, in this case, a favourable trade. So that's what motivated me to play knight c4, but as you can see by the double question mark notation, this is actually a game-losing blunder. You can try and find what black's move is here, if you like. It is bishop takes f3. This is just lights out. White can resign here. So let's look at the options. Okay, if you take with the rook, then that's going to be met by a back rank mate. If you take the bishop with the pawn, then again black can take here, and then once you take back, this is going to lead to checkmate as well in no time at all. And white also doesn't have the option of not taking the bishop. If you play rook to d2, for example, just trying to add defenders to g2, that doesn't work. Black has 3 attackers on the g2 pawn, and that is enough. And you don't even take this rook, actually. You play knight h3, which is mate. But the incredible thing is that my opponent didn't see that. I mean, I didn't see it either, obviously. I wouldn't have played knight c4 if I had. But my opponent, despite spending quite a bit of time in this position, missed it as well. Instead, he took the knight, going along with the line that I was looking at. So chess does funny things to the mind, doesn't it? That's not even a very difficult tactic, I wouldn't say. The bishop takes f3 sacrifice. Yeah, I guess we both have to keep working on our tactics, right? So okay, we take the knight, and the game continues. I'm not dead yet. I lose the pawn, but I expected that. And I play b3 here, which is a move which looks a bit slow, but my thinking was that I also wanted to play this queen e4 idea with the battery against h7. But if I played that straight away, then black has time to take on b2. And that's a checkmate threat. So actually giving this check doesn't help me here. Black's king turns out to be perfectly safe on f8, or if I give another check on e7, and black's still got this mating threat. So that's no good, hence b3. So I create the threat, but black deals with it quite smoothly with g6. So now I have to think of another plan. I try to target this pawn on e5, but we get a trade. Note, by the way, that even though you can take this rook with check, then black can just bring the rook back and has gained a tempo against the queen, and also has control over the open file, whereas my rook's a bit more passive on e1. So I just took back with the rook. Black gets his own rook to an open file, and I decided that I'd had enough of this knight hanging around on f4 like a bad smell. Time to get it to move. So it goes into h3 as expected. There's a big fork there which I need to be cognizant of. So king to g2. Now the knight reroutes itself to g5 with an attack on the queen, and I played queen to g4, just holding the defense of this f3 pawn. But this is another mistake. This is another chance for my opponent to gain a big advantage here. This time he finds the first move. He finds rook to c3. So now there's 3 attackers on this pawn. And it's not so easy to add defenders in a good way here. I mean, I can play rook to f1, but yeah, it's getting very shaky, especially after black plays h5, and now I do have to move the queen away from defending this pawn. The other way of defending the f3 pawn is with bishop to e4, which is what I played in the game, but that turns out to fail as well for the same reason, h5. So now the queen has to move, and once the queen moves, this pawn is going to be short of a defender. I play queen to d7, hoping for queen to d8 check so that I can trade the queens and at least avoid being mated. So again here, though, black has the chance to win the game instantly. He plays rook takes f3, which is the second best move, but in chess, in these critical moments, there can often be an enormous difference between the top move and the second best move. The top move was actually to take the bishop with the knight. Doesn't seem to win any material at first, because after you take back, you give this check, and the king sits on g1. The problem is the follow-up, rook to c2, and there's not a good way to stop the mate on g2. Yeah, again, white can just resign here. But instead we had rook takes f3, and this does win a pawn for black after I play this check. He goes here, of course, and I take, and he takes back. So black has won a pawn, but again, at least I have survived. A lot of his pawns are on light squares, and I've got a light squared bishop. So I go over here to target this pawn. Black defends, and I get the rook active as well. So the combination of my activity and the material imbalance with the knight versus the bishop means that this is not that easy for black to win, actually. So now we've got an endgame, and the goal is to be just as annoying as possible. And I do that with bishop to d5. Now this knight can't move. If the knight did move, then the pawn on f7 would be lost. So black's trying to trade off this weak pawn by playing a4, but I stopped that one. And now black is offering to give up this pawn so that his rook can get active by taking on b3. So I don't do that. Instead I target this pawn on a5. And actually black can't defend that one, really. So I have actually managed to win back the pawn. So material is now equal. This pawn here is a passed pawn and is a bit scary, but in response I've got these two passed pawns. So I even thought here that I may have some winning chances. So king to d4 seems to be looking to get this pawn moving. So I move my king over in response, getting ready for this. But then I get surprised. I get surprised by the move knight to c5, a move which I had assumed wasn't possible because it seems to simply lose the pawn on f7. And you know what? It was getting quite deep into the game. We're already past move 40, so we've already been playing for almost 4 hours. And it's easy in such a situation to assume that, oh, maybe my opponent didn't see that. Maybe my opponent missed that. But no. Right before I was about to pick up the bishop and make this capture, I noticed the follow-up rook to f6 check, forking the bishop and the king. My opponent missed a lot in this game, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have missed that. So, well, the bishop's also under attack, so I need to do something about that. So I move it back. But now black, again, has an extra pawn. So this is a tough situation, being down a pawn again. I thought that I was back in the game, but as soon as that happens, right back into the quagmire. And I played rook a6 here, looking to trade the rooks. I feel like my drawing chances are much better with the rooks off the board. Black wisely avoids the rook trade, and now I get this bishop and this pawn to defend one another. So this is still not that easy for black to win. We get rook to e7, putting his rook behind the passed pawn. Very good practice. But with this check, and then with this move, rook to d7, I do finally force the rooks off the board. If the rook tries to avoid the trade, then I'm going to take this pawn. So black feels obliged to capture. And this endgame is what I've been aiming for. It's well known in endgames that knights struggle against pawns on the edge of the board. And that's exactly the situation that I've got here. So this is going to be a bit of a struggle for black to not only win, but to defend. let's see how it continues. So we get a few more moves. I'm trying to target this pawn chain, obviously. So black defends. Now I attack this pawn, and black defends again. Okay, time to get the king active. And now it's time to ask this knight where it's going to go, because we've got ideas of moving this pawn all the way up the board. He goes to c5. I thought that knight to a5 would also have been interesting, but I think he didn't like the look of king coming in to bother the knight, because the knight on a5 actually can't move. The knight has no square it can move to which isn't controlled by my bishop. So knight c5, but now the pawn gets going. Black tries to get his own pawns on the king side going. So I try and attack the knight, and now this is an unexpected move, just letting his knight be captured. So you always got to be suspicious of moves like this one. I smelled a rat, and of course if I take here then I'd actually be losing because there's no way to stop this pawn from promoting. So I didn't do that, instead take the pawn back. But we can keep harassing this knight, and actually here I had a chance to win, which was not at all easy to find. I'm down to increment, been playing for more than 4 hours by this point, but apparently bishop to b7 is wrong and bishop to c4 is correct. Bishop to b7 makes a lot more sense to me because I'm keeping control of the promotion square, but bishop to c4 has the point that after the knight moves, you can actually attack this pawn, and the bishop also stops these pawns from moving down the board, allowing the king to get active. Very subtle, I know, but that's what endgames are all about. Tiny subtleties which make all the difference. So I actually had a winning chance here, but honestly, after such a long game and so many let-offs, I can't be too hard on myself for missing that. So bishop b7, the knight comes to c7, and my problem here actually is that black is going to be able to sacrifice his knight for this pawn. Well, that might seem okay because, well, let's just look at what happens. Let's say that black gives up his knight and I've got this bishop. The thing is that even if I win all of black's remaining pawns and I still have my own pawn and my own bishop, this is a wrong rook pawn endgame. The pawn is on the edge of the board trying to promote on a dark square, and I've got a light squared bishop, and black's king is well placed. So even in the best case scenario, if black can give up his knight for the a pawn, then the best that I can hope for is a draw. So black starts bringing his king over. I give this check, and now he gives up all of his pawns over here to win this dangerous pawn. I take the pawn and offer a draw, and that's how the game finished. So it's fair to say I rode my luck in that game, and given the amount of trouble that I was in at different stages, a draw is a great result. More than I deserved, really. So let's just quickly recap a few of the key moments. The first one is all the way back in the early middle game, where black was threatening to come in with knight to f4. I created counterplay via queen to b4. It's always important to play with a plan, and often targeting the opponent's weakest pawn is a good way to find your bearings if you're not sure what to do. A few moves later I was able to add even more pressure to this pawn, and even though I didn't end up winning it, it was still a good idea. Apart from that, I think the main thing in this game is that when you're in a critical moment, you have to take the chance when it's on offer. Here, my opponent could have won the game instantly with bishop takes f3. He didn't find it, and so the game continued. Also, later on, in this position here, the winning move was to take the bishop and then give the check, and then This is going to be curtains for white. What do they say? That chess is 99% tactics? I think this game is a good example of that. So we move on with half a point. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. If there's enough interest, then I'll do more of these recaps from the tournament. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I'm Nathan Rose. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.